Okay, good morning, everybody. My name is Tim Hayes, and I am the Executive Director of AIR CRE, and I want to thank you for attending today's Town Hall meeting featuring Marika Erdely of Green Economy. Marika will be discussing California legislation Assembly Bill 802, also called the Building Energy Benchmarking Program. Marika will break down the key issues related to building energy disclosure requirements, including benchmarking, rebates, and why compliance is critical for the commercial real estate industry today. Before I introduce Marika, I want to mention a few things. First of all, this session is being recorded, and we will make the recording available on Monday. Once it is ready, we will send you an email with a link to the recording so you can listen to the session again or forward it to clients and colleagues. As an attendee, your microphone is muted. However, if you have questions you would like Marika to answer, please type those questions in the chat box. I will be monitoring the chat box throughout Marika's presentation, which should take approximately 35 minutes. And after she finishes, we will do our best to respond to those questions. One final comment regarding a new service AIR CRE will be rolling out next month. Since mid-March of last year of 2020, when the shelter-at-home orders were put in place, there has been much talk about the legal action and lawsuits that may result as a result of our current situation. As everyone knows, most courts are already overloaded with cases, and the current situation will certainly not improve things. As a result, mediation has become a very viable option. With this in mind, AIR CRE will be rolling out a professional mediation service in mid-February. Although we hope you and your clients do not have a need to mediate, in the event it is necessary, AIR CRE, with our more than 60 plus years of commercial real estate experience, is uniquely qualified to provide this service which will focus on commercial real estate and business matters. We'll be messaging out the details in the coming weeks, so be on the lookout for those emails. Okay, let's get to today's presentation. The topics Marika will be covering over the next 60 minutes include California's energy opportunity, what is benchmarking, AB 802 energy disclosure law, local disclosure laws, the goal, energy and water efficient buildings, how do we get there, rebate and incentive programs, case studies, cost-effective approaches to energy efficiency, and where we are headed, and then we will follow that up with the question and answers. Marika Erdely is the founder and CEO of Green Economy, a full-service energy consulting and construction company located in Santa Monica, California. The mission of Green Economy is to help clients improve their property's market valuation by optimizing energy efficiency and water-saving solutions, making the building more sustainable. Marika is a LEED accredited professional with special designation in building design and construction. She is a certified energy auditor and Fitwel ambassador, and is also a licensed contractor. Marika earned an MBA from Pepperdine University and a BA in business economics from UC Santa Barbara. And with that, Marika, take it away.
Thank you. Thank you, Tim. Appreciate being here very much. I've been a speaker at AIR events in the past, so I hope this is very knowledgeable information, good information for everyone to gain from this webinar that I'm going to be showing you. So feel free to get any questions that you may have, and I'm happy to answer any of them. So we're going to talk about energy disclosure laws and really what's going on here in the case for green buildings. And why are we focusing on commercial buildings? Because they are the largest consumer of energy in the country. Commercial buildings, as you can see, just in California, 37% of the energy consumed is coming from commercial buildings. So when we really look at how do we reduce costs, carbon going out into the atmosphere and make buildings more energy efficient, and so they operate at a higher efficiency, we really need to look at the commercial sector. So this is focusing on the fact that commercial buildings are the biggest consumer of electricity. So the process to analyze how energy efficient a building is through a process called Energy Star benchmarking. And it's using the EPA software, Energy Star Portfolio Manager, and it provides an Energy Star score of 1 to 100. It helps the process helps understand how a building's energy consumption measures up against similar buildings in the software nationwide. This is the standard used by all of the states in the country for assessing buildings efficiency. 100 is the most efficient, 50 is kind of a median score. And if your building does provide for a score of over 75, you can Energy Star certify it, which is a great certification, and it shows that your building is a top performer. So in order to benchmark, we really do need to get some very accurate information. And one of the key areas is the actual energy usage data. The software will take information for electricity and kWh, gas and therms, and if the building does have a solar system, that information can also be entered into the software. When we're talking about benchmarking buildings, we're also looking at the most recent 12-month period being the calendar year. That is what all the disclosure requirements require. So we're looking from January to December, and we do need consecutive months of utility data. Now, how do we get that data is one of the sometimes difficulties of benchmarking, where in the past, gathering data from the utilities was not the easiest thing. Now, if you have a building with a commercial building with less than 3 active utility accounts, you still do need the tenant to approve that utility data. In a residential setting, if you have less than 5 active utility datas, you will need to, and one of them being residential, you will have to get tenant authorization. Therefore, it's important in the leases that that is always mentioned, that the tenant must comply with these energy disclosure laws in order to get that tenant to sign off on that. It's called a scissor form in order to get the data from the utility. The utilities now are able to download aggregate data, which is bringing in common and tenant data into the software. So before, you would have to get authorizations from every single tenant. Now we only have these requirements, and then we are able to gather it all, and it comes in as one number. One of the other key areas in benchmarking is really that data related to the building. And there are ways to default that, but it really does affect the score. So we send out a survey, and it does include the size of the property, the age, how much of the spaces are air conditioned, parking, irrigation. And this would differ, the questions here would differ based on the building type. There are 80 different building types that you can benchmark in the software. Number of employees and computers is a key one, in hours of operation, because obviously if you're operating less hours or more hours, and that needs to adjust and take into consideration the amount of energy being consumed by the building. And that's something right now that we're also going to be noting as we benchmark for 2020, that buildings that have been shut down during COVID need to be designated as vacant during that period, so the score that comes out of the benchmarking is accurate. So one of the things that we really like when we're looking at benchmarking is the data that comes out of the benchmarking. Like, why do we do it? Yes, it's a compliance requirement, but there's actually really valuable data that's generated once the accurate information has been entered for a building. And this is a report that we pull for our clients. And I find it really helpful because it shows not only the Energy Star score, but also some other energy metrics. And you can also set a baseline, comparative baseline. Let's say you started benchmarking in 2018. Where are you in 1920 and in the future? And also, where has the building gone after retrofits have occurred? So this is a very key comparative, those comparative columns are super important. We look at in here also not just the Energy Star score, but also the energy under the energy categories here for site EUI and source EUI, which is where you're really looking at the energy, the kWh electricity and the gas, which is in therms. And right now they're both being consumed by the building, but they're kind of like an apples to oranges. And what the software does is they converts them both to kBTU, which is a UK measure of energy, divides it by square foot. And that's actually, the lower the number is better. And site EUI is just how efficient the site or the building is. And then the source EUI is really looking at where the energy is coming from, as far as the distribution center of the energy to the building through the transformer and then being consumed. So it's great. It's always a higher number of sources than site because of those distribution losses. What I find interesting about this report is you can actually set, when you look at the columns, you can see a percentage change. You can look at the property's target based on putting that in there. We had it at 15% better than the baseline. And then there's also this median column, national median, and that's coming from the CBEC study. It's an annual study that is done of commercial buildings. That's really helpful to see where your building stands and compare to the median of all the buildings out there in that study. And then if your building had an Energy Star score, what would those metrics be? So it kind of gives you a feel of where you're starting or where you're going, where you've gone. So it's got some great data here. Also, for those interested, it gives GHG emissions, and it will also track water on here. So it's a great report to help understand what's happening in the building. We also find these graphs, they've added these a couple years ago, which are really interesting to see trends over time with natural gas use in the red and blue being the electricity. And you can see like this building had most likely a boiler replacement of some sort. So you can see how the gas consumption dropped after that retrofit. And then here you can also look at water, what kind of trends are happening. Water's a little bit harder because sometimes the water companies bill every other month. So the trends kind of have a little bit of a difficulty, but also you can still see what's happening over a period of time. We had several buildings last year that we benchmarked, and they had one huge spike, and it was because some homeless people had come to the building and used the water, and you could, sure enough, you could see that spike in the water usage. Another valuable information that comes out of Energy Star is the ability to actually graph the data and provide it in a portfolio analysis. Here we have a client that we've done this for, where you can really see what's going on with the portfolio, where it stands, how many of the buildings score over 100. Here in the portfolio standings, here we have 50, over almost 51% of them scoring between a 75 and 100. So you kind of get a feel of where your area, if you're doing really well in your portfolio, or you need to spend a little bit of energy to try and understand what's going on with all your buildings. But it really is, the data is so valuable, and you can use it in a lot of ways to help you understand where your buildings may be not as efficient or are efficient, and where you can spend some time and energy and make them more valuable and operate at a lower cost. So let's talk about what's going on with California's energy disclosure law. So some of you remember there was a law, AB 1103. It was in 2014 and 15, and it was tied to financial transaction. It was all buildings over 10,000 square feet had to comply if they were transacted. AB 802 is different than that. It doesn't require it to be a transaction driven, but more it's an annual disclosure. Every year it needs to be done. The reporting needs to be done to the California Energy Commission, and it involves just benchmarking energy consumption of the building, not water. And it does focus on large commercial and multifamily buildings. So who needs to comply with this? It's the owner's responsibility, very key. A lot of people think, well, maybe it's the tenant. No, it's the owner of the building, and the owner needs to get the information from the tenant, but it is ultimately the owner that needs to comply with this law. So currently, the owners of commercial buildings that are over 50,000 square feet with no residential meters must comply, and multifamily buildings that are 50,000 square feet and have 17 active residential meters must comply. Now, one note is that if you do have if you have a business park or a multifamily park that has, let's say, 4 20,000 square foot buildings, none of them are over 50,000, but if they share a meter, then they do need to comply. So again, this is a state law. It's all over the state. Unfortunately, the California Energy Commission has been very tardy, and they have not sent notices out to a lot of people. No one has received notices. So a lot of people don't actually know about this law. It started in 2017, but just because they haven't sent the notice doesn't mean you don't need to comply. If you are complying with a local benchmarking law, like the city of LA has a law, which we're going to talk about, that disclosure meeting the city of LA's law will automatically provide compliance for the state law. Again, we're going to be looking at using the Energy Star software, and we will be reporting energy use for the last 12 months, and it is due June 1. Now, there are a couple of exemptions, and one of them is a big one for industrial buildings. It needs to be noted. If the building gross floor area is greater than 50%, is used for manufacturing or scientific experiments, like real manufacturing, including a main production area, high ceilings, heavy equipment, assembly line, production, that building does not need to comply. So that is something that we found many buildings that we've looked at have not had to comply. And so we note that, and then those people don't need to worry about it. If the building did not have a certificate of occupancy for more than half of the calendar year, it doesn't need to comply. And if the building is going to be demolished 1 year or less from the reporting date, then it doesn't need to comply. And condo complexes, industrial ones as well, don't need to comply. So one of the things that a lot of people have said, well, we don't want to comply because there's no enforcement. And AB 1103, its predecessor, did not have enforcement. But I will tell you that this one does have teeth. And we did check in yesterday with the California Energy Commission, and they said they would be fining for 2020 compliance. So I'm passing that along. And it does show in the final regulation that enforcement is tied to a public resource code 25321. And what that code says is that the California Energy Commission will notify the person responsible, which is basically the building owner, of non-compliance. If after 5 working days the owner does not comply, the owner will be subject to a civil penalty with a hearing that complies with constitutional requirements, which I'm not sure exactly what that means. But this is the kicker. The civil penalty will not be less than $500, no more than $2,000 for each category of data for each day the violation existed and continues to exist. So if they start fining this year for last year's compliance, it could be expensive for building owners, especially those with portfolios. So this law and most of the disclosure laws do provide for a public dashboard. They really want people to look at this and look up their buildings, look up buildings they're going to purchase, they want to lease, and see what's really going on with it. Here we picked the building that is where the AIR offices is, and you can see the site EUI is 97, which is kind of high, and the Energy Star score is 28 out of a gross floor area of 227,000. So it's kind of an interesting data, and you can see what data has been provided as far as how many office buildings with the dark blue, retail, and all kinds of different buildings have complied. And you can see where the Energy Star score is actually pretty high. Most buildings there's a lot of buildings that have complied and are over the 75 in this lower graph here. So people are spending money and are making their buildings more energy efficient. And you can see that with this graph. But it's kind of interesting to see what's happening. And here we have the site energy use intensity, which I had mentioned before. Again, the lower, the better on that score as well. So a little bit more on there are some local energy and water disclosure ordinances. The city of LA has one, and they do require owners of large commercial and multifamily buildings to report energy use annually. Some cities also require performance reporting to typically do every 5 years to demonstrate efficiency. So here's just a quick graph or map of what's going on. The City of LA's program, affectionately known as EBW, is focused on all buildings over 20,000. San Diego also has a benchmarking law right now at 50,000 square feet. The city of San Jose has a law of 20,000 square feet, and they also have a performance piece of it, which means that your building is going to have to become more energy efficient. San Francisco also has an ordinance, and then the city of Berkeley. So these ordinances are popping up all over in an effort for people to focus on their and understand their Energy Star scores and make their buildings more energy efficient. So the City of LA's law, let's talk about that a little bit, since there are a lot of people that work here in the City of LA. It is a law that has a performance requirement. So the phase 1 is the annual benchmarking that we will be doing to send to LA Department of Building and Safety. And then the phase 2 is the reporting performance documentation, which is every 5 years. EBW also needs to be reported June 1 annually. So what we're looking at here is the city's requirements of all commercial buildings over 20,000 square feet. There is no exception for manufacturing in the city's law. If you have a manufacturing building, you still need to disclose it. And then owners of multifamily buildings over 20,000 square feet. It doesn't matter how many meters there are. So this is a City of LA law. It is not a county law, and it does include LA DWP service area. They did send notices, LA DBS did send notices and has identified each building with a building ID on that notice. So again, phase 1 is benchmarking. Phase 2 is you have to have a complete performance reporting, either of a performance path, which is you have an Energy Star score of 75, or a prescriptive path when your building has a score of less than 75. So these reports are due June 1, and the performance reports are going to be due December 1st, 2021, based on the last digit of the building ID. So buildings with 0 and 1 as the last digit of the building ID need to comply this year for the prior year's data. If the process here on phase 2 is that if your building is not energy efficient, then you're going to have to undergo an ASHRAE level 2 audit. These are not cheap audits. It's a very detailed audit of all the systems of a building, documenting the energy savings recommendations and the cost benefits of all of those. So it's very involved, and it can run from 15 to 40 cents depending upon the complexity and the type of the building. And then they also are requiring a retro commissioning piece, which is really understanding, not only are you having an audit report done where you're documenting all the things going on in a building, but they're also requiring that you actually fix those things and you focus on the systems that operate in the building, from time clocks to control systems to anything. It's kind of the thought of the way the building was designed. Is it still operating the way it was designed and at its most efficiency? And it's really looking at all of those systems. And they are going to be making recommendations that people retrofit their buildings with LEDs, solar window film, HVAC retrofits, and solar PVs, whatever, to make their buildings more performance oriented and perform better. There are exemptions if you already have an Energy Star certified, if you already have a building that can be Energy Star certified, which is again a building with an Energy Star score over 75, then you can meet an exemption and you don't have to do the audit and you don't need to do the retro commissioning. Also, if you were able to certify that the buildings energy consumption dropped by 15% over the 5-year period, and your water is reduced by 20% during that period, which is kind of a hard ask, that water one. If you can meet the energy 15% reduction, but you can't meet the water, then you would still need to have a water audit completed. There are certain measures that you could install into your building, multiple ones if you had a cool roof, HVAC retrofits, things like that, that you would then could maybe avoid the energy audit and retro commissioning, which I'm always trying to avoid that. To me, it's great information, but it's a lot of money for a very involved report that a lot of people don't understand. My focus and our focus in green economy is really, if you're going to spend the money, spend it on retrofitting the building so you have those long-term energy savings. EBW, the City of LA's law, does have some exemptions. Again, if your building does not have a certificate of occupancy for the entire calendar year, you don't need to comply. And if the building wasn't occupied due to renovation for the entire calendar year, or if it's going to be demoed before the benchmarking reporting date is due, and if the building did not receive any energy or water services for the entire calendar year, then you don't need to benchmark it. And there are certain types of buildings that don't need to comply, but most buildings do in the City of LA. Here again, it's kind of hard. They didn't have it's a very busy dashboard, but the City of LA also has a dashboard where if you're looking to purchase a building or lease, you might want to look your building up here and see what Energy Star score it has, and help you decide if you're going to be paying the meter, maybe that's something that you're concerned about. You can get this information. So why comply? A lot of people don't want to comply. I talk to people all the time that are uninterested in complying. Well, my background is financial, right? And I feel there is a business case for this. There is a reason to do this, not just the tree hugger side and not just the carbon reduction side, but why, from a business standpoint, would you do this? So if you really look at this, the key here is that buildings that are more energy efficient, LEED buildings, Energy Star certified buildings, buildings that have been renovated, have higher rents. This is proven, and lower vacancy, right? People are less likely to move out if they have nice lighting and their bills aren't as high. And then you look at your expenses, if you have lower energy bills, that's just going to increase your net operating income. The net operating income and the cap rate provides for a higher valuation of the property. That's there, right? You're going to have a value of a higher, so you're going to take care of your building, and your building is going to be worth more. So it makes sense to do it. We have a couple examples here I wanted to show that were the case studies that we're working on. And right now, one of the programs that we're working in is the SoCal REN Incentive Program. It's for multifamily buildings in Edison and gas company territory. And this is just an interesting example. I thought I would bring it up. It is for a green loan that this work is being done for as well. And you can see that the top graph is looking at projected energy savings. So the highest energy savings is going to be by changing out the domestic hot water system, insulating the pipes, and putting in boiler controls. So that's going to save 19% of the building's energy. Then the gray area variable pool pumps, better pool LED light, low flow water fixtures save a tremendous amount of not just water, but gas related. And then there's tenant lighting, also 2%. And if you look at the cost side of this, like what's happening, look at that $10,000 that the tenant lighting retrofit is going to be saving. We had, I walked this property and it had 2 fans to try and cool the space. Each fan had a 40-watt incandescent lamp in the fan. One of the fans was right next to the HVAC unit. And I thought here, the 40 watt is just creating all this heat, and they're 40 watts, so 160 watts per fixture. And we were able to reduce them down to 3.5 watts per lamp. In addition, LEDs don't create heat. So here at the 40 watts or 160 watts, the fan is twirling, the air conditioning is literally trying to cool the heat that that lamp is creating. So there's a real savings if your tenant is able to reduce their costs. They're not going to move, and that's going to save you money, right? So there's also water fixture savings, the pool pump, and then you can see the DHW retrofit is pretty sweet there. There's quite a bit of money there. This program is really a great program too, because it gives incentives for that work. And here you can see the project cost is $135,000, projected incentives are $53,000, net price is $81,000. The incentive savings here is 39%. That's a pretty big number. And if you look at, oh, sorry, our number's a little slid off here. Annual savings, we're saving 44% of the KW and 28% of the therms. So that's a big amount. But what I see here and was key to the owner of this property was the increase in valuation, where you can see the annual cost savings for the common area. This is coming out of the owner's pocket at $15,000, almost $16,000 a year, with a cap rate of 4.5%. The increase in valuation is $351,000 for an investment of $81,000. Plus, you're going to have tenants that are going to stay because they're not going to have as high a utility bill. Currently, this building has a score of 61, Energy Star score, so it's a little bit better than the median. I'm really interested to see, we're just going to start on these projects next month, where that score is going to go, and are these savings going to actually happen? They come from the engineering company that works for the SoCal REN program, and it's all modeled. And so what we're going to do is we're going to study this as the retrofits are done to make sure that savings are occurring. Another case study, here's a building. We were actually a nominee last year for the LA Better Building Challenge Energy Project of the Year. And this building is an office building where we did quite a bit of work, HVAC EvapoCool, which is you're actually putting a cooling device around the large HVAC units, digital thermostats, solar PV, LED lighting with controls, EV charging stations, energy management system. And this building started with an Energy Star score of 26. It had a lot of deferred maintenance. It's now at 90. And it just was Energy Star certified. And you can just see in the annual electric usage and costs that the data, I mean, the energy usage from 2016 to 2020 is incredible, or even the full year of 2019, it's half. And occupancy went up another 20%. When he purchased the building, it was only at 70%. It is now at 90% occupancy, or 95. So even with higher occupancy, he's spending a lot less money. We can also look at time of use charges here on the other graph of where costs and time of use, when you're using time, what's going on with that, how that's going down as well. Here's an area. How do you identify that EBW wants that 20% reduction in water? And a lot of people ask, well, how do I even know what that is? And one of the things we found, and it's kind of an interesting thing, it's so what happens here is, here's a sample LADWP water billing. We're talking about sub-metering the water to reduce sewer costs and segregate the irrigation water from the tenant use. So if you look at the sample LADWP water bill, you can see that the water is running at about 345 HCFs. It costs $2,000, $2,200 at a cost of $652. The sewer cost is all on the same amount. They charge the whole thing because it's the water, it's 1 meter, it's all the water is being used, and they're going to charge you the entire sewer cost. And that's, so it's every dollar of water is 78 cents of sewer. So that's a lot. It adds up really quickly, right? $1,800. So what we did was based on an analysis of the occupants in the building, we were able to calculate that this property is approximately 11% of the water is used for irrigation. The cost savings for the irrigation is going to be about $187 a month. If you consider the cost to this sub-meter, the payback's 13 months, number of years, 1.1. I mean, it's really easy to then separate that irrigated water. It's never paid. You never have to pay sewer on it again. And in fact, then you also know how much of the water is used for tenant use, how much of it is for irrigation. And then you can focus on, well, how do I really reduce this usage? Because you know where the water is being used or the predominant water. This seems to be, to me, it's a no-brainer. We've got 4 projects working in this area right now because it's just, it's a waste of money, the sewer cost. One client was saying, well, I could have put all, they've owned the building 50 years. It's a multifamily building. They could, as he joked, well, I could have put all 3 of my kids through college for that sewer cost over the last 50 years. So it's money that's being lost, and we can fix it and also help better understand where the energy or the water usage is happening. Okay, so how do we focus on, what do we focus on with energy efficiency? How do we do it? There's 2 real parts. And I think the key here in new developments, like what new things that are being built. Yes, you can build to code. Yes. And that is efficient, more efficient than it was 10 years ago and 20 years ago. But within code, if you really look at, if you energy modeled a building and you could say, all right, well, look, we could have a higher efficiency system. What would that really, what usage would that have? And if I'm going to build this and I'm going to hold it, and I just built to Title 24, I'm going to be, you're wasting money. I mean, if you, here's an example of a project we had bid on where we're just looking at the kWh and the gas usage and the annual energy cost for just meeting code versus a higher efficiency unit, and the difference being 20% difference in usage and cost, about $46,000, which if you're paying $200,000 or $300,000 more for the high efficient system, it could be paying back in 4 to 6 years. You're planning to hold this for 10 years or 8 years or whatever. I mean, you can, the numbers can be flowed one way or the other, but it provides you this knowledge of, well, maybe I want to really make this a bit more efficient than just going to code. The long-term energy savings will end up resulting in a higher valuation of the property. So it's important to consider technology is here now. It's not like we don't have these tools. So it's important to consider that if somebody's building new. Other energy efficiency retrofit opportunities, LEDs, #1 item. There, it can reduce your building's energy consumption by 20 to 25%. Easy. And again, like I said, with the fans, fluorescence and incandescence, they create heat. So you're actually air conditioning more to cool that. LEDs do not create heat. So you always have an HVAC load reduction as well when you put in LEDs. Having better control of your HVAC system, making sure that the thermostats are off when no one's in the space, especially important now where people aren't always in spaces, they are more unoccupied. Solar generation is so important because it not only offsets the kWh usage, so the amount of usage that the building has over time, but it also reduces that kW, which is your peak demand. And that is going to be the driver of additional costs here in the future, called peak demand. A lot of what we're hearing about is controlling that peak demand, having Edison or LADWP, the utility, actually turning off or reducing the amount of energy that you can use during that period of time. So the addition of a battery where you could actually store that energy coming from your solar system and then deploying it to come and help you cover your peak time is key. That's how you can really understand how, over a long-term basis, how do you manage the cost of energy with your usage so you're not one of those people that is overcharged because you're using a lot of energy at 5 to 6 p.m. when the sun is down, but you still have energy being consumed. And maintaining equipment is also key to reducing energy waste, maintenance, and replacement costs. Super key. So where are we headed? What's the future? Zero net carbon. Those are the words. Moving away from zero net energy. Zero net energy is great, where you're just what a building is generating versus what it's consuming. But now we're really focused on carbon. And it's really focused on how do you get the grid to be really now to have zero emissions. What is it's called decarbonization. It's the new word of where we're heading. And what does that mean? It means the process of eliminating gas consuming appliances out of buildings. Gas creates carbon. Gas is very flammable. The gas infrastructure in the city of LA is over 50 years old. The cost to retrofit all of that is going to be paid for by the customers. It is going to be an increase in gas prices as more and more people move to electricity, away from gas, and that infrastructure is built. I was at a webinar last week where they were talking about where gas and electricity will be costing the same probably within the next 10 years. So the focus is on multifamily and single family residential and moving those appliances into electricity and not building with gas. Commercial buildings, electrification is a bit more complicated with boilers and things like that. So that's coming down the pipe. But the new building code that's going to be coming out next year, there's a real effort to have new buildings, especially single family, be built without gas. They're not going to exist. So it's kind of interesting where we're heading with that. And in fact, California has its own decarbonization goal to be decarbed for the building sector by 2045. So it's happening. So not only are we focused on saving energy and water, but reducing carbon that's going into the atmosphere. So how do we do that? Elimination of gas, again, increase in renewable energy, energy efficiency retrofits. There's also a huge focus on healthy buildings with green leases, green loans. A lot of banks, we've had a lot of interest in understanding how green loans and the banks that require them, what things they want in buildings to make them more energy efficient and also reduce carbon. And then there's Fitwell certifications and well certifications, which are tied to the insides of buildings and how efficient they are, and not as far as air quality and better for the occupants. So almost at the end here, rebates and incentives. So one of the things I really find important is how do we finance all of this? And one of the issues that we do have, and everyone should be aware of, is that what are green leases? It's really that alignment of the landlord and tenant goals. So if you are in a building or you own a building, and there's this issue of who owns the meter. The tenant owns the meter, but the building owner owns the building, and the tenant's going to get the benefit if the building owner does all these retrofits. So how do we align those two goals? So there is a new concept called, and it's not that new really, green leasing, aligned leasing, high performance leasing. It's really where the rental agreement or the lease agreement is, everyone's talking about it before it's signed. It's not after. It's like, look, yes, this building needs new lighting, it needs a new HVAC system, everything that it needs. Those are discussed in the beginning and really understood, and maybe incentives are brought into the picture, but there's a discussion about it, so it gets done. And it eliminates that mixed incentive between the owner and the tenant, and that understanding, so everyone benefits. The owner has a higher performing building, it's worth more, tenant's not paying as much for the utility costs. It's a win-win for everyone. So where's the money? There's a lot of money out there right now. This slide, if anyone's seen this presentation in the past, had a couple things. There is a lot of money coming in. It's worth grabbing. First one is the LADWP for new construction. This program was called Savings by Design. It was focused on energy efficiency. Now it's focused on carbon reduction. If you can build beyond 10% of the code, they will pay you. I'm waiting for Edison's program to come out like this as well. My understanding is their program will be similar. We were just on a call yesterday on this small business service providers, San Bernardino, Riverside County, incentives for gas consuming appliances and commercial applications for buildings with less than 50,000 annual therm use. So anyone who has a building out in that area that uses a lot of gas, has old gas equipment, this is a way to reduce. It's not electrification where we're getting rid of the equipment, but it's making it more efficient. Edison has a huge project coming out scheduled for Q3. Let us know if you're interested. It is on EV charging infrastructure, which is the most expensive part in any kind of EV charging system, where you actually, you have a meter in your building and you have to get that energy out to a location in the parking lot. And then you could add the charging units. Charging units aren't the expensive part. It's the EV charging infrastructure. And they have a lot of grants for that starting this year as well. SoCal REN, which I talked about with my case study, Edison and gas company customers. Gas company as well has a multifamily incentive program for replacement of gas consuming appliances. There's also this new electrification program that's going to be in all the utilities in the state. It hasn't come out yet, but it's for multifamily and single family residential. So if you're going to be replacing, if you have a solar system at home and your hot water heater is going to go out, it would be to your benefit to take advantage of one of these incentives and get a hot water, electric hot water heater, heat pump, and you wouldn't have a gas bill, as large a gas bill, because the solar would be covering their incentives. LADWP has a lot of incentives here too, lighting and for other things. PACE, which a lot of people may or may not know of, it's where all the incentives are, all the costs are retrofit, are pulled into one bucket, and it's added as a property tax on the building. Cost segregation, which a lot of people are aware of, very important if you're going to be buying a new building, you're going to be doing retrofits. You can really reduce your your tax liability with that. Super important. And the federal tax credit has been extended. It was going to drop to 22% for solar. It's now staying 26% for this year and that year. And if you do roof, electrical work, and battery, everything together, it all gets, and a solar system, it all gets tax deducted at 26% federal tax credit. So super important. So very quickly, last slide here is that this is what's happening with the new administration. There will be money flowing in to the energy commissions of the various states. There's going to be money spent on building energy efficiency retrofits, school construction. Already there's one, AB 861, 681, workforce support in this field. There's going to be new affordable housing. So there's a lot of money that will be coming in to help additional funding. So green economy, we've been around 11 years. We're benchmarkers, we're auditors, we're contractors. We make sure it's done right, and we're involved in the whole process. So feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions. We're here locally in Santa Monica, and thank you for your time.
Very good. Thank you, Marika. And we do have quite a few questions. So
Okay, sorry, I didn't realize I talked so long. Sorry.
yeah, we have about 10 minutes left until noon. I know you and I spoke about this before the town hall that you can stay on a few minutes
Yeah,
longer
I'll stand.
if necessary.
stay.
So let's move quickly. The first question is, and for residential buildings, if owner only pays for one or two utilities, will they need to comply? Does it matter what utilities are covered?
No, no, as long, it's just tied to the size of the building. As long as the building is over 20,000, needs to comply.
Okay, and that includes residential buildings.
Yes, multifamily.
Okay. Second question is compliance. Go through again what commercial buildings are required to do this at this point.
All commercial, for the state of California, all commercial buildings over 50,000 square feet. If it's a multifamily, it's 50,000 square feet plus 17 residential meters. And exemption for manufacturing, if manufacturing is over 50,000, if over 50% of the manufacturing, the space is over 50% is manufacturing, they do not need to comply.
Okay, so if I have a 100,000 square foot building doing manufacturing, I don't need to comply.
If it more than 50%, yes.
Okay. And this is a state requirement, correct?
State, yes, state.
And so it covers every building in the entire state.
Yep.
And what are the what are the penalties at this point?
The penalties is the $500 up, a minimum of $500 up to $2,000 per day from the date you were supposed to comply.
Okay. And I'll answer this next question. It says, do the AR lease documents contain the language mandating tenants to provide their energy information? Every tenant I asked refused. The answer to that question is yes, they do in paragraph 11.2. And I'll read it to you really quickly. It says, within 15 days of lessor's written request, lessee agrees to deliver to lessor such information, documents, and or authorization as lessor needs in order for lessor to comply with new or existing applicable requirements relating to commercial building energy usage, ratings, and or the reporting thereof. So yes, it's in our leases. Does this apply to homeowners associations which are owned, but actually part of a homeowners association? Or does this apply, I think it means to say, does this apply to homes which are owned, but are actually part of a homeowners association?
Yeah, if the building is over 50,000 square feet, yes, and has over 17 residential meters, yes, it still needs to comply.
Okay. If 12 months of consecutive usage is required, then when is the first reporting requirement for a shell building completed in October of 2020?
It would be in 2021 because it would have been, you still need the full year. So it would have been January to December 2021. You're going to report in 22.
Got it. Good. Our broker, and you may not know this answer, our broker is responsible to disclose to buyer that fall within AB 802 requirements. I'll answer that one. My response to that is whether the broker is required or not, it would be very good practice if you know that a building is, obviously you know the size of the building. So you would be telling tenants and owners who own any building 50,000 square feet and above, unless more than 50% of it is used for manufacturing, yes, you would want to disclose to them that, hey, as part of this lease, as a tenant, you're going to have to provide this information. And as an owner, you're going to have to the owner, as an owner, you're going to have to provide it to the state. Does complying with this reporting obligate owners to continually improve or lower their energy consumption, or is it only the reporting that is required? Otherwise,
Right now, sorry. Right now, the city of LA requires that you actually approve. San Jose says you have to improve. The state currently only needs you to report, but the word is eventually you will have to make improvements. Right now, it's only reporting.
Okay, so if you are in a building in the city of LA, it's a requirement.
Yeah.
And you said San Jose, it's a requirement.
Yeah.
Anywhere else in the state, you don't have to necessarily improve at this point, but that is coming.
Yes. And the state might drop it down to 25,000 square feet at some point. They had talked about that. Right now it's high at 50,000.
Okay, can this reporting be as simple as forwarding utility bills to the city of LA?
No, you have to actually put it in Portfolio Manager software, and then you have to get a report out of that software and download that into the DBS software.
Okay, and if anybody on this call or any of our members or any of our contracts users wants to learn how to do that, I'm assuming you provide that type of a service where you can teach them.
Yeah, I mean, it's harder to teach someone to do it. It's a lot of work. We prefer to just either do it for them and then they don't have to worry about it because it's a once a year thing. So it's kind of hard to do it, once a year and remember all the pieces.
Okay. How does this account for turnover in types of tenants? Different tenants may have different energy needs. So would an owner be penalized for taking on more heavy manufacturing clients where the last tenant may have been one doing storage?
Now that's where it's really important, that building survey that I talked about, where you have to fill out who's in the building and what hours they're operating and what the building use is. So as long as that is being completed properly, then the software will adjust. When you tell it it's manufacturing or it's a distribution, it will adjust and it will do a better job of communicating what's the proper score if you do the building survey accurately.
Okay. Marika, are you seeing the impact of I suppose what it's asking is the increased valuations when appraisers do analysis on value?
Yeah, I see that. I talk to other people about that, and yes, I do. And I think the fact that in the last month, 2 different customers came to us with green loan requirements tells me that the lenders also see the increase in value of the property, and that's why they're making these buildings have to do those retrofits.
Okay. In the SoCal REN study that you showed as a case study, what year was the building built and what was the cost to update the office building retrofit?
The building, I think the building for the multifamily, I think it was 1978. And what was the cost for the retrofit of the office building? It
Yeah.
was about $1.5 million, and it had about 200,000 in LADWP incentives, and there was about 600,000 in federal tax benefits.
Okay. For triple net leases, how do you account for energy savings if the owner makes capital investment in solar? I think that is a question, and we have a contract committee meeting on next Thursday, a week from today. I will bring that up, and then and I will get that answer to you. But you could also ask if you work with a commercial real estate attorney, you can ask them that question. That question, I'm sure they'll be able to help you, or an accountant.
Would that be part of the green, maybe part of the green lease is, look, I'll put on a solar, so it's going to benefit you, but you're going to have to pay more rent or something.
Yeah. How do you account for energy savings if I may? Yeah, I'm not quite sure what the exact question is being asked, but I'll run it by our contract committee and try to get an answer on that. Next one, and you may not know the answer to this either. With the effect the pandemic has had on occupancy and collection of rent, including eviction moratorium, how is the state and LA Department of Water and Power expecting building owners to spend on CapEx or be able to pay fines? My answer to that would be, I'm sure it's on a case-by-case basis. Again, the building owner who should be doing this type of reporting and is not doing it, if the state comes after him or her, they're going to have to make a case as to why they're not reporting. And if they want to blame that on the fact that they can't get a bum tenant out of the building, or that they're not collecting rent, the building's vacant, they can't get somebody in there because of the pandemic, I'm sure that would be handled on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah, I mean, we've found a lot of buildings that don't need to comply for various reasons. So sometimes you can get them to agree. So I think it's true. You would have to make that case.
You have to make your case. Are these funding sources just available in California? I mean, I would assume this is, right now, this is only a California law, right?
This law is, but yeah, the incentive programs, there are incentive programs all over. Every utility pretty much has them. So it just depends. You just have to look for them. Just right now in California, there's more coming all the time. So it's really kind of interesting.
Okay. Next question. Yes, the presentation will be made available on Monday or Tuesday of next week. But you will receive an email from AIR CRE with a link to the materials on our website that you can then download and share with your clients or with colleagues. I believe you already covered this, but any update on when the 2020 data will be due?
It's due June 1.
Okay. Can AIR provide a mandatory disclosure available to include in PSAs and leases? I assume that you're asking for a disclosure. Do me a favor, email me, whoever asked that question, email me at thayes@aircre.com and clarify that question for me. And then I will get a response for you. Last question, and this is a good one. I've never done this process before. How do we get started?
Hire us. I mean, I think one thing about green economy is we really do take the time to make sure that the report is accurate. We do have some competitors out there who don't, and they're cheaper, but they don't actually do the reporting. So we really do take the time. Or you can get on LABBC has a tutorial, I think, and also LADBS also has a tutorial if you want to try and do it yourself. A lot of people have called and said they give up. And again, it's a once a year thing, so it's hard to do something once a year and do it right. So, you know, we do a good job. We care about the results. So feel free to reach
Sorry,
out.
and I jumped back over to the chat box and there was actually a couple more questions.
Okay.
So let me see something here. It said, please explain again, if there are multiple buildings that add up to more than 50,000 square feet, does it matter if multi-legal parcels?
It doesn't matter about the parcel at all. The parcel is not driving this. It's the building size that's driving it. So we had the example, and I actually didn't think it needed to comply. It was a building in San Diego, 4 20,000 square foot apartment buildings. So adding up, they had over the 17 meters, but individually they weren't over 50,000. But we found out that there was the gas utility was feeding all of the buildings. So they were on one gas meter, and so they had to comply. So that's the key. If they're smaller, but they share either an electric or gas meter with another building, and then they exceed the 50,000 and 17 residential meters in a multifamily environment, they will need to comply.
Okay, and again, will the slide deck be shared? Yes, the slide deck and the recording of this town hall will all be shared Monday or Tuesday of next week. Last question now, and this is really gonna be the last question. How can you, and this is, I don't think you have the answer to this, it's a sort of a subjective question. How can you get tenants who refuse to provide their utility data to comply? And why didn't the legislators in Sacramento make the utility companies provide them to the building owners, provide the information to the building owners?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard, and I was disappointed that they still had those requirements where you had to get tenant approval. I thought they would eliminate that, but I think it's a legal part. I think it's part of the lease. I think you have to have a disclosure in there, or a line like Tim had said, where the tenant has to comply like with anything else.
And as far as those tenants that don't comply, I guess you would take any steps that you would normally take when a tenant isn't complying with any part of the lease. So whether that's getting getting attorneys involved or what the case might be, but yeah, I mean the purpose of having a lease is so that the parties fulfill their obligations, and when one of the parties isn't doing that, there are legal remedies that can make that happen.
Yeah, and if all else fails, we can default in the software and we estimate it, but we don't like to do that, but you can.
Okay, so once again, I want to thank everybody for attending. Marika, that was fantastic, very, very interesting. The slide
you.
deck and the recording will be available Monday or Tuesday. If you have further questions, certainly you can reach out to Marika at Green Economy. If you Google that, you'll get it. Her information was posted at the beginning, so it will be made available when we send out the materials on Monday or Tuesday. Thank you, everybody. Have a great Thursday and a nice weekend, and we'll see you at the next town hall. Thanks,
Thank
Marika.
you. Thank you.